And this list goes on and on. But it was the same thing as what happened in Yellowstone. One thing caused another thing, caused another thing, caused another thing. And that's what a cascade does. It creates a chemistry where the entire ecology then begins to operate differently. And that's a revival. And that's indeed what we have had. Now, this whole thing of revivals and what it means, God originally created everything perfect. And then sin came in and affected everything, but that sin did not destroy all of that perfect creation. There are remnants of it that still remain in the system. If it hadn't, it would have all been destroyed. But the remnants, as in Romans, suffer in the midst of a culture that they don't belong. They don't fit anymore in this system. But whenever we get close to something that is like a revival, it's actually returning it to, what the remnant of that's within the culture of how God intended it to work. And the more it begins to work like that remnant is, the more we call it revival. And the whole system begins to change. And the only way this thing works is for whole systems to change, not just pieces of it. They all have to contribute to the other parts of it. And that's what a cascade is all about. And so the remnant occurs and nurtures this whole thing. And this is what a revival is. And eventually, and so it's a very clear theological thing here that things are beginning to now work the way God intended them to work. And the revival and the cascade is what causes that, as it taps into the way it was designed. Okay, then the next part is just in the midst of all of this beautiful stuff, you have a tree that Judy has here, in the midst of this beautiful stuff that begins to happen in this cascade, and it, like I say, this was one of the worst cities in the country to live in. It's now one of the best. Dramatic things have happened in this city. I know because I spoke here 40 years ago, and we talked about the problems, and I can see now what's happened today. And so you have, it's like a beautiful tree, that just came out from a little seed, but then it begins to cover and be an environment that nurtures all kinds of life under the branches of the tree. And the garden begins to again grow. And so God, in his natural revelation and how he redeems natural world, works in the same way in the spiritual world, from a keystone to a cascade. And that's what our revival has been. Now, one of the problems that we have to deal with in this cascade is, of course, we had a great revival in 1903. What was that?
Wales.
Huh?
Wales.
Wales, okay. That's true, too. I was thinking of the one that happened in California. Huh? A Pentecostal revival. Azusa Street, okay? Now, Azusa Street started out, what? With blacks and whites together. That's how it was. And the Keystone involved both blacks and whites. But the cascade separated them too. And all the black Pentecostal denominations started and the white Pentecostal started. And the two separated completely. That is not what God had intended. He wants the cascade to work in tune with the Keystone, and it didn't. And that's what he wants in our city. He wants it to be so that we together begin to see a difference here in this revival than even what happened with the revival that happened there. And so, go ahead.
And even here in our city, there's been healing between the AGs. I'm looking at Kurt and I'm looking at
yeah.
Right here in our midst. And probably a lot of people don't even know that two denominations that separated back then have publicly said, let's get together. I mean, they retain their distinctives, but yeah.
And so that's what God is trying to do here. He's trying to create this intergenerational, intercultural revival But he allowed the non-Caucasian community to start it. And now we're participating in it, and it reflects where our culture is going. And we need to call it a revival, because it is. Dramatic things have happened. And so it began to work that way. Now, the other thing that's a big thing is that our demographics are changing, and we now need to have a culture that is highly interracial. Go ahead, yeah. About what?
Knowledge and potential for coming.
Oh, yeah, well.
We did talk about it.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that later, but yeah, the intended, the counterproductivity, I think when things all divide according to racial things, that is not God's intent. He did not want it that way. The issues of racism have been almost the same since slavery and have not changed dramatically. If we could see a change in that, in this city, it would be dramatic. We're not there yet. But I know, talking to my dear brother, it's possible. It's possible. We need to listen to what the black community is saying and need to understand what they're saying more clearly. And they don't feel like they're being heard too often, okay? But the revival can bring us all together, okay? So he wants the new demographic. And the other thing that has to happen too is that we basically are into a whole different culture than we've ever had in the history of the world before. And that is that now, today, elite people populate 60% of the population or more. Each of us are living like elite people lived 40 years ago. Well, even in 30 years ago, okay? And so today, for all of human history, the elite was 10% of the population, common people, 90%. Now, for the first time in human history, in the last several hundred years, we've developed an elite population that is enormously bigger than it ever was before, okay? And what do we say about elite populations? They tend to be unintendedly counterproductive in complex systems. And so that's what's happened in our elite culture. We've devastated our ecology and caused enormous problems ecologically in our world. We have caused a lot of social problems because we've operated unintendedly counterproductive to help people, and the social system has been deteriorated. And religion, basically, apart from Christianity, religion generally has declined in this new culture, and it doesn't grow. As a result of this, you have different reactions that religious people and Christians take. And the three options are frequently, when you're dealing with this new culture, is conservatives fight the immature culture, try to destroy it. The radical Islam really clearly does that. But the highly conservative on every religion tends to be warring against the thing, okay? That's very common. And then the liberals, on the other hand, kind of try to join the new immature culture and start doing the unintended counterproductive things that we don't want to happen. But there is a whole other thing, another option. God is redeeming this culture. It's immature, and He wants to make it better, more mature. But we have to find the life that's within it and nurture that life and bring it to fruition. And so as we begin to find out, one of the things that we found, it was by studying systems thinking, which came from the natural world, that we discovered the quiet revival. And it was by studying how keystones and cascades work that we understood what a revival is about. Okay, and so this is all begins to now change, and we are now in a situation where we have to begin to deal with all that. Now, this final thing, and I'll try to, we've got time for this, or should I? Yeah, okay. And the process of the gospel, it begins with observation, and then we go to positive regard, then we go to communication, and then meeting perceived needs, basic needs, and then multiplication. Now, this is what Christ did. He started 30 years of observation before He even started His ministry. He loved us. It was positive regard. He communicated with all His parables. He met perceived needs through all His miracles. And then He went on to meet the basic need of being the keystone for the cascade, which became the multiplication of the revival. So this is how we nurture vitality to create a situation where we eventually will find a keystone that will produce multiplication in the world. We can't predict keystones, how they will work. It's too complicated. But if we nurture enough vitality, we'll eventually hit one, and God will be with it. And so the keystones are the observation, positive regard, communication, perceived needs, basic needs, which is finding the keystone in the cascade, which produces the enormous revival that then happens and which we have just experienced. So we've gone through this thing in our own city, just like Yellowstone. And we've seen the keystone happen, which we didn't want to recognize fully because it wasn't white. And God said, I'm going to do it this way. And he's going to start it there. And then, eventually now the white and Anglo communities or so forth are joining in this crusade, in this thing. And hopefully we have the opportunity to produce in this city a coming together of blacks and whites to work together in a way that is almost unprecedented since slavery. We need to work on that because God wants this revival to be different. Okay, David, you're the one that got me into this. And
So, well, first, can we give Doug a hand for this? I mean,